Welcome to the Dynasty Deep Dive, where we go beyond the surface and into depths unknown. I am joined by the man himself, Jeremy Popolars, at Popes FFH on X. Jeremy, great to have you on the show, man. This is a great time of year. Like, the football juices really start flowing when training camp starts. We're deciphering the news versus noise. Is this your favorite time of the off season, or is it scouting combine, the draft? Talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, this time of year you can't say isn't really partially your favorite. I feel like if you don't, you're probably lying. We've been without football for a little bit, and now you're finally getting, like you said, we got the exciting part with the draft and the combine, with the rookies, where they're landing, places to go. But really, right now, you start to see like who's actually getting used, where they may end up, and like you said, it's always that fun little game of like what actually is news and what is kind of that air quote noise. So figuring it out, my favorite thing this time of year is always like, oh, they're running with the ones. And it's like, guys, it's practice. So like in case someone gets hurt, everybody runs with the ones at some point throughout training camp. That's kind of the point. But either way, it is fun to kind of try to decipher who's actually going to have a significant role in the offense, especially in Dynasty here. And like you said, a little bit of that deeper dive, maybe there is some players that were missed that maybe on your waiver wire, even in some of those Dynasty leagues, or a guy that you did get on the waiver wire that you're hoping really pops. We've seen that happen for years now. So it is exciting. I would say, though, really the favorite, though, like you mentioned, is a little bit more of that combine stuff in the draft. Really the draft, I guess. Combine is meh. But it would be more of the draft. I really enjoy that Dynasty aspect of the rookie scouting side of it, and kind of just seeing, hey, where these guys are going to go, the draft capital, and then like understanding for me where I start with fantasy, it's kind of like from the football application to then what's going to happen. Because if you can't be productive on the football field, they're not going to play you. In turn, there's not going to be fantasy points. So That's where the draft for me feels like it's probably the more important to me. I enjoy that time frame, and it just feels in that little bit of the dead zone before the season. Now it's fun because the season's here, but now it's like, okay, how much of this is real news versus noise? So
yeah, it's like this roller coaster of like watching Bashal Tootin run a 4.3, right? And you're like, hell yeah, this is awesome. And then watching him get
they can't
landing spot, and then he gets the hamstring right now.
Yeah, or he just can't beat out my boy Tank Bigsby. That's what it is.
Or hang on to
everybody.
The rock,
right? that was one of the most controversial tweets I probably ever had. Was Tank Bigsby was going to take Travis Etienne's job? It didn't work the year I said it. The year later, kind of did, So maybe he's just good. Just took a little time, Yeah. He's got to be patient. That's all.
Well, I'm going totally off the cuff of the show sheet I sent you. Who is going to be the RB1 in Jacksonville this year?
Oh God, don't draft any of them. I don't know. It really seems like a mess. I think Bigsby, has a chance. I think we saw it last year. I think Bigsby is the better of the pure runners of that group, the least of a liability on the ground. As a pass catcher, it's Travis Etienne. So depending on how this offense exactly looks with the new coaching staff, it likely Etienne I could see producing more fantasy points. I do think, though, like your football depth chart, it will probably be Bigsby, but it's going to be between Bigsby and Tutton kind of battling out, I think, for the lead, like ground type of role. And then you'll see, like I said, PPR, half PPR. Travis Etienne it'll be almost similar probably to what we had last year, unless the Jaguars offense does take a significant jump, then where that red zone early ground type of running with Bigsby may be a little bit more valuable, because he'll probably find the end zone a couple more times than he did last season, which could propel him, I guess, over Travis Etienne. But I do think right now, we saw it on X, it was kind of a hot topic in Tank Bigsby today when we were recording here, that the ADP on Tank Bigsby is what's appealing at the moment. Yeah. He's kind of the last one you could take, at least in redraft. And even in Dynasty, he's probably fairly affordable. Like most people think he's kind of done. Maybe some people now with some of the training camp stuff, he's risen, but still a guy that I think you could get fairly affordable that has a decent upside. So I'm probably riding with Tank, but
Yeah, no, I agree. It's like he's been getting a lot of the, to your point, all this, who gets the touches in practice. It's like you really can only put so much credence to that. But he's getting a lot of the rushing attempts from these early 11 on 11 practices. And they seem to be kind of working in Tootin and ETN on the in the passing game. And I think it boils down to it's probably going to be a gross committee, right? So I, I I don't know if I'm staying away from all three of them. I'm kind of peppering I'm probably the lowest on Tootin, especially now after the hamstring news and just the ball security issues and just kind of the reality of like both of these guys that he's stepping into have better draft capital than him, are also really good athletes, good runners of the football. Like he's not walking into a totally terrible, running back room in my opinion. Like I'm the guy who has loved Travis Etienne ever since he was back in Clemson. Like I still can't shake like watching the highlight tapes of him, like every handoff he gets, taking it like 80 yards to the house. I know we're not in college anymore, but a guy can dream. So um, I would love to, dude. The reason I brought you on the show today is you do a lot of great work on your X page. Again, that's at Popes FFH. And one of the things that I really liked was some of these, like, I'm a nerd, I'm an economics guy, like I told you before the show, and I love just digging into like charts and graphs and kind of sifting through the crap and finding some of the underlying meaning to it. So one of the things that you put up on your page that I'm going to share on the screen right now was really cool, dude. I haven't seen anything like this from anybody, and it talks about deep yards, right, on deep targets. And so I thought what was coolest about this was that maybe you can kind of start to infer some of the things that might carry over into 2025, right? So the first one that stuck out to me, and I think everybody knows it, is that Alec Pierce is a deep play maven, right? 36% of his points, fantasy points, came off of deep passes. So I'll start with that. Like he's been a guy I've been kind of taking stabs on in late rounds, especially like, in best ball. And I know you mentioned you're not a big best ball guy, but like Dynasty, there's even people play best ball Dynasty leagues, right? And I could imagine him being a sneaky target in something like that. Do you think that Pierce can pull that off again in 2025 and return value to fantasy managers if they're taking darts on him in the later rounds?
I could see that. I think the biggest key here with Alec Pierce and even going to probably be some of the AD Mitchell talk is going to be the quarterback. So Anthony Richardson had a tendency to target. He's a gunslinger. We've seen it at Florida. We've seen it now here at the limited amount of time we've seen in Indy. He's not afraid to put the ball up, and that's part of this offense. And Pierce is really kind of that role in this offense. So I do think that can happen. The issue that I worry, like you said, is best ball. So when I was thinking about this chart and looking at it, it's kind of more of a where were some of these points scored and how, because I've done it in the past talking about Travis Etienne. We can tie this together. I've done it in the past of like with running backs and points off of touchdowns. So touchdowns are very good and they're great. But that year that Travis Etienne was running back 5, I believe it was over 50% of his points were touchdowns. So you're relying on something that's unpredictable. And that's where most of that production came from. So there's a very good chance that you have a regression coming, and that could be the same way here with some of these deeper targets. Yes, they're a player that gets targeted heavily because the chart itself is designated off of the top targets of excess of 20 yards from FTN. So it's started based on guys that get targeted heavily, and Alec Pierce, I expect to kind of reproduce some of this, but I wouldn't say that these points are overall like lockstep in stone. But it's a guy that, like you said, in best ball, later chance, a guy that's kind of been cast off because everybody's just out a little bit on the Colts passing attack. And they pre-made assumption, at least early in the offseason, was that Anthony Richardson would not be playing. It's starting to seem like he likely is going to be the starter week 1 because he's already practicing in training camp, and I don't think they're going to give up on him just yet for a failed production in Daniel Jones already. So I think that you're looking at a guy that's going to have a good chance to reproduce this, if not better, if we get Anthony Richardson for a full 17 games. So I do like Alec Pierce. I think that he's being overlooked because, much like you said, the deep targets are there. It's easier. He doesn't have to convert on as many to get as many fantasy points. So I do think that this is something from Alec Pierce that you could reproduce for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, we're looking at the high end there, right? I'm 36% of his fantasy points coming off of deep passes. Then my eyes go to the guy right below him, Malik Neighbors, right? You kind of color coded this so nicely, where the lighter white on the far right column kind of indicates that that's a lower percentage, and he's one of the lowest on this column, right? And now he gets a guy, Russell Wilson, who's like, say what you want about that guy, he can throw a nice moon ball. He throw a nice deep ball. You're starting to see the training camp videos of him and Neighbors connecting on long passes. So to me, I see a potential for more of those targets to be converted into receptions and some maybe some really good upside for him. I will be dead honest. He is my 7th rated player. So like, you've got your kind of core 6, right? Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Those are like the 6 that are kind of locked in as like the top 6 guys in a redraft. After that, starts to get kind of like, who pick your flavor. Do you want Christian McCaffrey, Ashton Genty, right? I've been going Malik Neighbors just because I think he can show off some more of the explosive plays. So that's kind of my stance with Russell Wilson in town. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly in lockstep there with you. As it was a guy that I wasn't super should have been higher on, I'll say, coming out of the draft, and a little bit of a miss there on my part. And I think that, much like you said, that's another way to look at this chart. How I said a little bit towards the regression model, you can also look at it as a potential for significantly more upside. Him and even Drake London, another player here that's a little bit towards that lighter side, with London only having 18%. Like you said, Neighbors was only 14. So there's some positive regression that could happen here, especially with a improved catch percentage, we'll say, on the deeper targets, because both of them top 10. I mean, Malik Neighbors still had 39 targets down the field, and I would expect that to maybe go up some. The only issue that I could see a little bit is you do have those guys in like Jalen Hyatt and Darius Slayton that tend to run those clearing routes in that offense. So Neighbors might not really have. That's where the other side of this comes from. Like, Neighbors just was a more productive intermediate to short area player, and that's where he was getting his fantasy points from. You can look at it this way as well. So I could see a little bit more. It's just more of like, he's a little bit less of like the deep ball savant where you'd say like Alec Pierce was. You know, he has more to his game, much like you're looking at some of these other players like Ridley, another one that's up in the 31%, and even DK Metcalf at 38%. Like a guy that seems like he was kind of just like stretch the field. That's kind of what he does. You know, you see some of these guys in these lower portions, they're just getting targeted under the 20-yard mark, which in lieu can kind of also say they're a little bit more versatile in the offense, as well as produce in other ways than just being like a pigeonholed deep ball guy. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, you heard it here first. Brian Thomas Jr., 0.94% off deep passes. Like
that one surprised me.
So deep, you know?
Yeah, that one surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
Because from what I remember watching most of the highlights of last year, like it was him catching a deep bomb for touchdowns. So like it was surprising when I looked at that, and I was like, wow, he's significantly lower. I mean, he's up there, but like, I mean, not very high. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. That was one that got me too.
Last guy I want to touch on here is DK Metcalf. You brought him up, like, you know, obviously the highest percentage on this chart of his fantasy points accumulated from deep passes. Like, he's a guy who's just like a physical specimen, right? He eats candy and runs a 4.3. So now he's got Aaron Rodgers in town, right? And for me, I think that could be pretty dang exciting in terms of a guy who has been, you know, say what you want about Aaron Rodgers. He might not be the most mobile quarterback. He might not be what he was a couple years ago, but the guy still has, one of the better spirals, one of the better arms in the NFL. Do you think that he's in a position to like, exceed expectations and potentially, exceed expectations there in Pittsburgh?
I would say yes. I'm very in on DK Metcalf. I haven't checked as of recently in this last week of the consensus, but I would say I'm a little bit ahead of the consensus on DK Metcalf. He's a guy that I think not much of an option in that passing attack outside of him. We've seen Aaron Rodgers
Right.
lockstep with a receiver and kind of just feed that guy. And I
Yep.
think that's what Pittsburgh wants. So for me, I do think that you're going to see much of like this. You're going to see some of those deeper targets. They'll probably be higher on this chart again in next year, as well as it might drop a little bit because I think you're just going to see him get fed on like slants and all that stuff as well underneath the 20-yard mark because he's getting out from JSN and Tyler Lockett, who kind of fed in that area in Seattle last year, which kind of in lieu gives you why his percentage was a little bit higher as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Great call out. In terms of like kind of consensus, to your point, it's like there's so many wide receivers on the board in a similar spot as him. You've got Calvin Ridley, Travis Hunter, George Pickens, Jamison Williams. I know I just rattled off a few names, but can you give me one, including DK Metcalf, of all those guys that you'd click on?
DK.
You're going DK over those guys. I think he's like I said, it's like those ADPs are shifting every day and they're all right around each other. But
when at least this is my approach in redraft, or even I guess you'd say a dynasty startup, I might go Pickens. But straight up redraft, straight up 2025, I'm not going to take a receiver 2 over the receiver 1 on a roster. Like, unless you're getting into like, I don't know, like a really bad receiver one, like the Bills. Like, love the Bills, but like,
you don't.
I would take all those guys over like Khalil Shakir or Keon Coleman. You know what I mean? Like, I will take them where their ADP is, but I'm not. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing that. Or even Jerry Jeudy. Like, I'm not overdrafting a guy as a wide receiver 1, but DK falls into that territory. Very similarity. So I would take the receiver 1 on a roster as opposed to the secondary option in the passing attack.
Yeah, no, I agree. Fundamentally, I think that's super sound, right? Like Jamison Williams, Pickens, great players, boom bust potential, but to your point, not even wide receiver 1 in their own offense. So when you're shooting for ceiling outcomes, you want those guys who can earn 10 to 12 targets a week consistently, right? And so really agree with that. Last, we're going to close out with wide receivers. We're going to go to quarterbacks and tight ends after this because you've got some really good charts on those guys too. Last question, because you're our boots on the ground guy there in Buffalo. Is Keon Coleman going to go crazy this year?
I don't know what because crazy could be subjective, we'll say.
It's a good thing.
I was on another podcast and I don't remember which one it was, but I did say my bold take. I think that Keon Coleman will be a top 24 dynasty receiver after this year. So I will say yes, I guess. Depends on what crazy
something
is.
to justify that.
I just think that he was a raw prospect to come out from. And I could easily see him being like the Nico Collins mold. Like maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year. But given some time, the early camp highlights from what I can see in those videos, because I've not been to training camp just yet, it does seem like there's a little bit more fluidity to his game. And it just seems a little smoother. It seems like they're trying to build that connection. And I do think that Khalil Shakir still seems like the guy. And obviously some concern again coming out now with Kincaid's knee soreness, like they're going to kind of need Keon to be a guy. So I think they're going to force their hand as much as they can, and hopefully he's ready for it and can take that step. But he's a guy that I have in a lot of spots, and I would actively be trying to get if there's still some doubt in some players, because as long as you're not paying a premium, like I'm in on it.
Yeah, price is affordable on him. I think the one thing that, and I've said this on other shows, that kind of kills me with him is like, I really wish they would play him as like a big slot guy, like a Juju Smith-Schuster type of vibe. Like Matt Harmon, reception perception, does a lot of great work and has said like, hey, this guy's not a separator. Like he, might always struggle in that true perimeter X role. Like he could eat in zone. He could find success underneath. He could be a problem to take down once he gets the ball. I just don't see that happening in this offense with Khalil Shakir kind of like holding down that role, right? And so, you've got Elijah Moore who could play the slot. Like, I really think that they've cast Coleman to live and die on the outside, right? But
Mhm.
anyways, that remains to be seen. So, any closing thoughts on wide receiver group as a whole? Anything from that chart that you want to call out before we move to quarterbacks and tight ends?
No, I think we're good. I think we can ride with that.
Yeah. Like I said, guys, do not go anywhere. Next, we are going to dig into a really interesting graphic that Jeremy put together on quarterbacks, and then we're going to close it out with tight ends.
Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early best ball leagues that start in February and Dynasty leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it!
Yeah, if you think you're a big boy and you're not playing on FFPC, get your weight up. Going to be doing my first gorilla this year. So excited for that. Been waiting a little bit. Feel like there's an advantage to drafting and redraft kind of closer to the season start, right? So, yeah, great partners with FFPC. Check them out if you haven't yet. Next, we're going to dive into this chart, man. This one is really fun. It's a mix of like first reads, deep balls, check downs. So I'm just going to throw it up, and maybe like you could probably speak to this more eloquently than me. Just talk to me about where your head went when you were putting this together and kind of what you were hoping to get out of this.
So, much like you yourself, I enjoy to look at numbers in a way, but sometimes when you look at it, much like FTN, we have the stats hub over there, infinite amounts of data you could possibly have organized in any way, shape, or form, millions of filters, but sometimes it's too much. And even this one's a little bit of a lot of colors and stuff going on. But it is a little bit more. So we have tendencies is what this grouping mostly is from. What I was looking at was just trying to figure out what the quarterbacks do. Because again, your tendencies as a quarterback tends to be your tendency, and that's where you sit and you kind of that's your safe spot. And a lot of times the quarterbacks will fall into those spots. And for me, this kind of stemmed a little bit from the talk that like what is a check down or who checks down the most. And what I did is obviously you can have your blank numbers, 50% this, 50% that, compare Kyler Murray's 50, Lamar Jackson's 38 on first read targets, which is great and all. But I also then rolled in the differential, and the differential is just basically based off of the league average of all of these said numbers here. So when you look at this class, and it's at the bottom there, the sample's average. So it's just a grouping of these players. So I included basically all the players that potentially could start this year, obviously outside of the rookies. So the teams that had players, so like Spencer Rattler's on here for New Orleans, because we don't have the data from, say, Tyler Shuck or even like Cam Ward in Tennessee. So you're seeing some of those players in here. I don't even know if I put Will Levis on here because I felt it was pointless. But either way, so there is that. So I tried to organize it with at least every team's projected starter going into the season that we have data on at FTN. And then based it off of that differential to say, hey, where are they above the league average? Like in certain categories, and then kind of looking at it. So, for example, like Kenny Pickett in Cleveland, he leads the way in first read targets, and why was kind of my thought behind it of like, what do they do? So, like Kenny Pickett, He kind of just throws it where he's supposed to. He's
Right.
kind of in that air quote system quarterback. He's going to drop back. He's going to hit that first read. That's kind of the designed play, and that's what he's going to throw. And now this was only 4 games, so his is a little skewed because it's the Philly data. Now, again, you could go to a guy that's a little bit more games in there. Daniel Jones, another one that's a little higher. Dak Prescott, fairly high as well. Again, a smaller sample size. Or even Michael Penix. You know, Michael Penix was kind of a very first read target. Like, the play's designed to go here, and I'm going to throw it to there.
Yep.
So with the first read stuff, the thought behind that process is okay, if I have a play and it's designed, say, for Drake London, like, the chances that it's going to Drake London. And despite what the many people, I would say, think, not every play is designed to go to Drake London. So that also could mean that you're also going to see production from other players because plays will be designed for, say, Darnell Mooney or Kyle Pitts. Like, it's not the concern for me with, say, Michael Penix is whoever the play is designed to might be who he throws it to. He's not getting to that second read, and that could develop. It's a small 5-game sample. Year 2
Right.
now we're going into. You could see that develop, but the next column over, second reads, like, he's not even really making it to the second read and making a throw. So a little bit of a concern, I guess, there in the Michael Penix area. But the main premise was like, hey, I'm looking at who's a guy that, you know, makes plays kind of happen or moves off of that. For example, like I don't know, Caleb Williams, like, hardly throws to his first read. Like, I mean, minus 11%. I think that's the lowest one, if I remember correctly. Like, he's never throwing to the play design player.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, he is 36% of the time, but like,
Right.
way below the league average and one of the lowest numbers. I think it is the lowest on this chart. And then you look at some other players in that same category. Bo Nix was a guy that wasn't really throwing it to that first read.
Lamar.
And you're looking at it, you know, you're kind of looking at some of these, and you kind of see that tendency of like the little bit of the scramblers. Lamar's in that negative territory. Josh Allen's in that negative. Even Bryce Young's in that negative side of it. Mahomes is down there. Geno Smith, surprisingly, not despite being a really scrambler, but a guy that wasn't really hitting that first read. So that was interesting, I thought, because you're seeing a lot of these guys being those scramblers, and even like Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. So the thought was a little bit more of how or what style quarterback is it, and is there long-term success built into some of these players for, like, say, fantasy outside of just the scrambling ability. So to be a long-term dynasty asset, like, you want them to be a successful quarterback where, you know, like, for example, like Anthony Richardson, like, it was a great investment. Sure, the upside was high, but like, he's a raw prospect. What's the chances that he busts? Like, was he worth the 1-1? Do you know what I mean? So, like,
Yeah.
a little bit of looking at long-term and kind of seeing the tendencies of where they might be throwing, as well as like the check downs. So there's a big, when I made the chart, there's that big controversy of whether or not Justin Fields checks down a lot. So it's kind of looking at some of that, seeing who's a player that tends to check down or who's a little bit more aggressive, you know? So you'll see, like, for example, like Michael Penix, we're just going to go back to that because I know he's at the top of what I want to talk about. We'll talk about Anthony Richardson here in a second as well. First read target percentage is super high, as well as the plus 20 percentage throws was also very high. So it's a guy that, okay, Drake London and even Darnell Mooney, both of them are field stretchers. First read targets, he's not afraid to throw the ball deep. He's not going to check down and just dump it off. Where you're seeing like the players like Flacco, this guy who's going to throw it underneath Jared Goff, he's going to check it down. Justin Fields was the third highest, I believe, on this chart, maybe the fourth, somewhere in there.
Oh yeah.
And then you're looking at guys that are willing to stretch the field, like Anthony Richardson, far in hands above, much like I said earlier when we were talking about Alec Pierce. Like, he's a full 10% higher than anybody else off that league average. Like, he's the next closest is Michael Penix at 5.9. So, of literally throwing the ball over 20 yards in the air. So Anthony Richardson is going to stretch the field. So going back to Alec Pierce, like, there's a good chance he has a fairly good chance that he's going to have that. Yeah. So again, it's just kind of a way to look at maybe some of these tendencies and see, because the offense stems from the quarterback. So as much as you want to say, hey, I love, you know, I don't know. Let's try to think of somebody here. Tat McMillan, we'll say. And say Tat McMillan's a deep ball guy. Like, Bryce Young wasn't throwing the ball that deep. He was on like league average.
Yeah.
Like, so maybe that improves with Tet. You know, maybe you look at that. But like, you're getting some of these players going into certain spots and they're not really stretching the field. So, for example, Aaron Rodgers will say this mesh where it kind of hurts DK Metcalf a little bit. Like we saw the high percentage of DK Metcalf last year on the 20 plus targets, but Aaron Rodgers was actually below average on throwing. So like maybe that doesn't mesh as well. You know, maybe there's an issue there in some of that process. And again, no stat is a rock solid. This means this, as you would know, diving into them and looking at it, like you have to kind of take it all together. But I just figured this was a nice kind of simpler way, a little complicated, but simpler way of just kind of seeing some of these stats that I feel were important in the tendency side of it, of being, hey, they can go past their first read and make some throws to the second or third options, or they're extending plays, getting to the second, third option, or are they truly a check down king? And also, are they aggressive to kind of stretch the field where some of those other bigger fantasy points come from as well?
Dude, this is like Michelangelo explaining to someone the painting of the Sistine Chapel, right? Like this is
I wouldn't go that far.
I enjoyed this chart.
And I was even an art major for a bit.
I enjoyed this chart before you talk through it, but now I look at it in a whole different perspective. And like, just to summarize, with the first read percentage, when you were kind of walking through that, I kind of see it as like, if they're low, that can be a good thing, right? Like that means they're not afraid to move it off it. If they're not, it's not there. They're not going to get locked into that first person. But I also see it as like a playmaker or a panic kind of odometer. So like, for instance, Lamar, we know he's a playmaker. Caleb, I think, was panicking off that first read, maybe not trusting it enough, maybe just trying to do too much, right? Bo Nix being so low on the first read is kind of cool to me because he had an awesome first year, and so many people paint him as a system quarterback, and he wasn't afraid to move off that first read, right? So, and then to your point, above league average in 20 plus yard throws down the field. So some interesting kind of storytelling here. So I really, really liked this one. So are you keeping a candle lit for Anthony Richardson?
I will say this. I drafted him in Scott Fishbowl, so a little bit.
Yeah, then 100%.
A little bit. I mean, I'm never against anybody. In the draft class, was I CJ Stroud all day? Yeah. But like, nice. I hope that he turns out. You know what I mean? But I'm not hoping he has a failure of a career. But I mean, I'd rather have Anthony Richardson than Daniel Jones quarterbacking that offense on a team that we are hoping for, you know, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, like Tyler Warren, like
a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have Richardson, as sad as that sounds, I guess, for what we know right now.
Well, cool, man. Anything kind of closing thoughts? Anything else you want to make sure that gets surfaced around quarterbacks?
No, not really. Just look at the chart, have fun with it. Like you said, you can. That's the best thing about that. You can look at it and you can interpret it two different ways. And even when you make them in charts, they can be interpreted multiple ways. So,
yes, follow him at Popes FFH. Go bookmark these things. Go bookmark these charts. I would be curious to like. We talked about how Rodgers is kind of like, as he's gotten older, you know, he's not the same guy he used to be. To your point, that below average of plus 20 yards down the field throws. Be curious to see that from a historical perspective, because I'm sure he was above average at one point, but yeah, lately
I have thought of that. I don't know. FTN doesn't really keep the data. I mean, they might have it somewhere that I don't know of. For years past, like our stats hub kind of sits around like the same year, because we're constantly changing it and improving it, so it always gets different. So, but if I could find some of this, that would be interesting to see as well. I've seen that in some of the other things I've thought of. Like, I wonder what it looks like from year to year, right? You know, doing some of these year to year kind of things.
Yeah, could that have been a product of being in the Jets environment, and maybe he does throw the ball down the field more?
Yeah,
and they ask him to kind of open that back up, you know?
Yeah, and that's something you could look at too with the first read, like Bo Nix. Like maybe that's more of a testament to the receivers. You know what I mean? Like if your first receiver's not getting open and you're a decent quarterback, you're not throwing it to him. You know what I mean? So like, that's where you gotta. That's where the data.
$22 million a year.
That's like where you're getting. You know, maybe Cortland Sutton was all these 37% of the throws. You never know.
Yeah.
But so there's that variation as well. So you got to play with that a little.
Well, great stuff, man. Well, I would be lying to you if I said like those two were great, but the one that really prompted me to reach out was the tight end utilization chart that you put together, because like there's some nuggets in there, man. Like there's some, and I think to that point, like that one was kind of like calculus right there, that QB chart. Like I'm gonna throw up the tight end chart now. This is a little more, guys, the average Joe fantasy player already ingests this data, right? Targets
Math
per
A.
game. Yeah, this is like pre-algebra, which I still struggled with. But like you've got targets per game here, snap share, route percentage, target percentage, which I believe you have this ultimately sorted by.
Correct. Yeah.
And then percent of targets that they were the first read, air percentage of teams' air yards, and then fantasy points per game. So what stuck out to me immediately was just how I thought you did a really eloquent job sorting it by target share. And, the first three guys, Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce, no real surprise there. Jonnu Smith, don't expect him to replicate that now that he's in Pittsburgh. But then you get this guy, Hunter Henry. People still aren't in love with like the Patriots wide receivers. I mean, Diggs should be back and be the guy week one. But I had Andrew Cooper, the tight end whisperer, as he calls himself, on the show a few weeks back. He was banging the drum for Hunter Henry as a guy who could be like a sneaky zero tight end target, fade the position, get this guy at the end of the draft, and come out looking pretty solid with a guy who could be a top one or two target on his team. So, do you see it that way? Is he a sneaky target?
Yeah, I'll pound the drum for Hunter Henry any day. I've always liked him since his days in LA/San Diego there. I think the spot's really good for him, much like you said and kind of alluded to. The receivers are less than stellar at the moment from what we know. He's a guy that you still see here. These are very good numbers when you're looking at it. You're looking at numbers similar to what Kelsey gave us last year, or even Brock Bowers when you're going just past target share's not there, but the other stuff, which is also important. For example, like first read targets, like that's indicative of like you're getting schemed and game planned for. Some of these guys like Tucker Kraft, like 38% on the first read target. Like everybody's pounding the drum for Tucker Kraft, but like he's far down the pecking order in that passing game. And he's a guy that I've typically haven't been totally in on, but like you're looking at that compared to Hunter Henry, like Henry's almost near the 60%, and an opportunity can be had there. He's only at 6 targets per game, and I think that's just a product of the pure fact that they didn't throw the ball that much last year. So Drake May hopefully improving. Hopefully they air it out a bit more this year. Maybe not. You probably see a lot of Henderson and Stevenson. But there's a chance it could improve a little bit there, and you could see that he's on the field a lot with the snap percentage and route percentages being both plus 70%. So again, a guy that I think that there's some positive regression that could come in, just needs a couple more touchdowns, and he really would be a solidified top 12 tight end, I think, in 2025 pretty easily.
So, in Dynasty, guy like Hunter Henry, especially in non-tight end premium, not very sexy to go out and try and acquire, right?
Mhm.
But in a tight end premium league, he could be a sneaky target, right? And even in a dynasty league. So
Yes.
what type of, give me just an example of maybe someone you'd be willing to part with, some sort of offer you'd put together to get Hunter Henry in a dynasty league. Tight
I
end
actually
premium.
I got him last year for I think a 3rd round pick,
Yeah.
like mid-season. Like it was the playoff run. I think I have Kincaid on that same roster. And obviously Kincaid had his knee injuries and issues. And it was kind of like, I'm going to make the playoffs. I knew I was. And I kind of was like, I need a little bit more security. Henry had some good playoff matchups as well last year. Once it all folded out. So I was in on him. I think it was a 3rd. It may have been 2/3 or something like that. So I'd probably be in that territory. He is getting older, and New England's receivers will eventually be somebody. Maybe this year with Diggs, maybe Kyle Williams becomes something, maybe Polk or Baker or somebody emerges from that ashes. But I'm not investing a ton in him. Like you said, it's not a sexy long-term name,
Right.
but as opposed to, much like I said, Tucker Kraft, Dalton Schultz, like guys that are in that territory, I'd probably prefer to pay a little bit less and just grab Henry
Get
and
the
kind of ride
production
out
now.
2
Yeah.
years here and then look elsewhere, draft the tight end this year or look at one next year in the draft or something.
You heard it here first. Dynasty Deep Dive. If you're in a tight end premium and you have someone in your league who's, rebuilding, they've got Hunter Henry on their roster, throw them like a 26, start with like a fourth, maybe like a little bench player, and then work your way up to a third or something. But Hunter Henry can add value to dynasty rosters and tight end premium leagues. I think that's pretty clear based on this graphic. One other kind of topic of contention is, who is the dynasty tight end one?
I will say Bowers. My main issue with
Tucker
Bowers, right? I talk all the crap and then I go, actually Tucker crap. No. I will probably go with Brock Bowers at this point. I know it's probably fairly consensus. I know some people are really on McBride, but McBride is Murray's kind of safety blanket at the moment, but I think they want Marvin Harrison to be that, and they will make that happen at some point. In turn, somebody's going to lose some targets. There's still plenty of time or I should say plenty of meat on the bone, even if Harrison sees an uptick, because there is nobody after Harrison in that passing attack. So there's still some good to be had there, but Brock Bowers feels like he's going to be the Raiders passing attack. Jacoby Myers shouldn't be an oversight, and Jack Besh is yet to be seen. But I don't think that either of those guys are going to be like the key. I guess if you're really on the side where Ashton Genty is going to just like be the offense, then maybe I could see being a little bit less on Bowers, but I still think they're going to want to move the football. I still think they're going to throw, and when they do, it's probably going to go to Bowers or Myers more often than not. So I still lean to Bowers with the age and just the versatility. He's a little bit more athletic than McBride, can do a little bit different things, and kind of creates a little more after the catch than McBride does. So he relies less on volume, which is what McBride's living on right now, is just pure volume. And that's where the fantasy points are coming from. In general, he's still getting down the field a little bit, stretching the seam. It's not like he's like just a turnaround 3 yards, catch a football, but he's not Brock Bowers, who's necessarily making plenty of people miss after the catch or, really running away from defenders.
Dude, very great, solid foundation for that take. I can't poke any holes in it. Also that's because I would have said Brock Bowers myself, but I like the argument you put together there. We'll close it out with this tight end chart. Any other big takeaways that you got from putting this together that we didn't already talk through?
Yeah, I think if you're going to take your time and go ahead and take a look at it, I think the target percentage is key. That's kind of why I sorted it from it. But again, look at the first read targets. I feel like that's an indication of how they're used when you're looking at guys like Dalton Kincaid. Again, the knee soreness popped back up, so it's not ideal. But a guy that, there's a lot of first read targets. He's only running 50% of the routes and still at a 14% target share, still averaged 7.8 PPR points per week. There's room for growth on the bone there, as well as you're looking at some guys like, I don't know, even Evan Ingram, Dallas Goedert. The target shares were down, route percentages were down, but they were still very much a focal point when targeted, when they're on there as far as those first read targets go. So something to that effect of kind of looking at that. Strange's numbers a little inflated, so don't get crazy on that, because again, he wasn't out there as often as a true starter last year. But a guy, again, that position, you're looking at Strange at 71%. You can look at Evan Ingram from last year at 62%. It's an offense that targeted the tight ends a lot. Now it's a new regime there in Jacksonville, but we'll see. That could be something to look at as well. So kind of just look at the first read targets, see there. And then air yard percentage too is important at tight end. It's all important data. That's why it's kind of in there. But again, looking at some of that, it's not always, I guess, when you look at these charts, at least when I make them, the highest in each thing is not always the best. You're kind of looking for what's closest to the median average around guys that produce well. So look at your Bowers and McBride. Where are they outside of target percentage? Where are they in the other categories close to those guys? That's where that differential came from with the quarterbacks. You don't need to be the best in everything, but you want to be upper tier to above average in most of them. And that's where you can kind of find some of those guys that might break out in the coming season.
Yeah. Mark Andrews is an interesting one, right? Like lower target
Mhm.
percentage here, but to your point, like 60% first read rate, 17% air yards percentage, some interesting other indicators outside of the low target percentage. And, I think a lot of people um, kind of threw him to the fire just because he caught so many touchdowns, which we know aren't sticky from year to year. But there's some supporting evidence here to say he might not be totally toast, right? And uh, I've been targeting him over like likely. It just that's kind of
Mhm.
been my perspective going at these drafts is like that's Lamar's guy, and he's going to continue to target him. So, um, really great stuff, Jeremy. Well, last question for you. You've been doing some tadpole bowls, which are I don't plural, singular. You've been getting more into like the already next year's rookie class is kind of my point here. Can you give us maybe a few guys to keep an eye on that are still in college but could be people that we should already be keeping our ears to the ground on in the dynasty streets?
Yeah, I feel like this year is not going to be your year to really reload. I think it's got some interesting names at the top. Um, that a lot has yet to be seen. So we'll have to see. This year's going to be a big year as far as the production goes. It's really open in a lot of positions. I think there's some decent depth at the quarterback position if they all declare. The running backs, I think there's also some decent depth. There's nobody that's, Ashton Genty or like a Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud. Like, maybe you could argue Arch Manning, but I think we really haven't even yet seen it at the college level. Like you really
Yeah.
haven't seen that elite production just yet. So hopefully we do see that to really cement that, like, yeah, he's kind of the guy. But other than that, I feel like you're really looking at a wide open area. One player I've kind of loved, I was hoping he declared last year and didn't, is Dane Key. I'm excited to see him in Nebraska and that offense there. So some players out there, but it's kind of just top heavy. The most of the players that you probably have already kind of heard of really feel like kind of just are going to be in that same territory, like the Nicholas Singletons, the Arch Mannings, Lenore Sellers, like um, the receivers. It's kind of just wide open, and then the tight ends are just meh. So hopefully you don't need a tight end, to be honest. Hopefully you took advantage this year, because yeah, not much out there. So
Dane Key. Never
yeah,
even
he's
heard
a
of him.
guy. Ah, yeah. He was
I just put
productive at Kentucky, fell off last year, and hoping in a little bit more of a passing attack in
transferred to
Nebraska. We'll
Nebraska.
see.
Little
See a
Dylan
little bit of love
Rayola.
with Rayola and Brule. Hopefully, we'll see a little bit reviving there. Kind of a perimeter X type of receiver. Little bit of you know George. He probably doesn't have the aggressiveness of George Pickens, but kind of moves a little like him. Kind of similarities there. So
I'm gonna do some homework. I love it. Like I love that you didn't hit me with like, Jordan Tyson, Jonah Coleman, like some of the real low hanging fruit. Like you gave me a real deep cut, dude. And that's what
yeah,
this deep dive show is all
I
about.
I enjoy the deep stuff. Like everybody can get the top. Like it's always how since I started. That was kind of my vibe of like everybody knows you're going to start Jamar Chase. Like let's focus in on the mid tier.
Yeah,
20 to 36. Like that's where you win weeks. Like not because you started Jamar Chase. Like
right.
I hope you started Jamar Chase. You better not have sat him. Like that's fantasy 101. Like it's finding those mid tier deep dive type of stuff that can really think about the people that drafted Puka Nakua.
Yeah.
Just saying,
Well,
I was one of them.
oh,
Just gonna
nice.
say,
Well,
going
and
out
that
there.
goes back to what we said at the beginning of the show. Like that was news or noise, right? People chose to ignore
Mhm.
the Puka drum, and it just kept beating and beating and beating. And then he was owned in almost like all dynasty leagues before the year started because no one was ignoring it at a certain point. There was a lot of leagues where he was going undrafted in dynasty drafts, and you had a chance to scoop him up off of waivers during training camp just by keeping your ear to the ground and being able to separate the noise. So Jeremy, you were a rock star on the show. Can you just close it out? Give any plugs you want, where people can find your work, anything like that.
Yeah. So pretty much everything's over at FTN, the FTN Dynasty podcast. You can follow me, like you said, on X at Popes FFH. I usually link everything to there. I'm also on Blue Sky as well, also Popes FFH. Also running a promo code right now if you want to use Pope. if you're not part of FTN, if you like the data that you're looking at and you want to play with it more, you can definitely head on over there. The Stats Hub, like I said, this is just surface level. You could go through anything. You can rainy games that start at like 8 p.m. Like there's every filter you could possibly imagine and go through a lot of this data that is used elsewhere as well. So it's not just freelancing data. They do have it in some pretty big sites as well. So,
Wow, cool.
but the promo code is POPE, POPE, saves you 10% on certain subscriptions. So I think it's NFL Plus and higher. I'm not sure exactly which ones they have, but again, then you get all the access, the rankings, Radcliffe, Tyler, Orginski. So we got some good draft rankers as well. So check that stuff out. Head on over FTN. I rank too, but I don't have the clout that those two have. So we'll go with those two who are really good at it. I'm just average. So
well, you're special to me, Jeremy. So
I appreciate that.
well, thanks for joining the show, man. If you guys like the show, leave a like. If you've got questions for Jeremy and I, comment, and then subscribe to the Player Profiler channel, because we are going to keep fire content coming to you forever. So thanks for watching, everyone. Good luck winning your fantasy leagues.